Hello, welcome to Phoenix and the Dragon. Stories usually on the riverbank in Wales. Today I'm in the byre again. It's much warmer here. It's the end of a very long week at the end of September. And I don't know whether you can hear it, but we've got a fire in here and it's lovely and warm. Last week was the autumn equinox. The wheel has turned. The seasons are changing. Outside, the leaves are starting to turn. The farmers around here are all doing the last cut on the hedges along the roadside. There's a real chill in the air. Winter's coming. It's time to prepare. It's a time of the year to look back. Think about the things that you've done, things that you've achieved, maybe things that didn't go so well. Thinking about the things you want to carry forward into the next part of the year. So tonight I'm going to read you a story called The Music and the Magic. I had the idea for the story. I had a beginning, a middle and an end. But when I started writing the beginning, it all came out very differently. I don't mind, and I hope you enjoy it. Patsy clung to the ladder with one hand, while the other followed her eyes to the tumble of slates beside her. Last night's storm had lifted just one, but 4 more had tipped down after it. Today was a special day, and she didn't want her visitors to get dripped on. Scrambling to refix the tiles on the roof, wind pulling at her hair, Patsy ignored the fear. The benefits of independent living had to have some downside. Clinging on with her knees, she tapped in the single nail, hooked the hammer back on her belt, and refitted the other tiles. Today she had fixed her roof, and not for the first time she'd surprised herself since handing in her notice in the city and making a new life for herself in the country. It was harder work than she'd imagined, but every day she was grateful for the thick, safe stone walls of her tiny house and the warm, mellow heat of her wood burner. Back indoors, she allowed herself tea in her rocking chair and a moment of reflection before preparing for the afternoon's guests. 1 year ago today, on a similarly blustery autumnal Friday, she'd taken possession of this house and embarked on a musical, magical adventure. Working in the city for 16 years had transformed a red-haired, middling achiever at school into a respected, designer-suited businesswoman. Patsy's perception and understanding of the subtle yet important changes on the buoyant stock exchanges of the world rocketed her to the position of financial analyst in just a few years, consulted and photographed among the rich and famous. She'd revelled in the limelight, no longer usurped by her older sister's academic achievements, and enjoyed the life that her hard-earned money bought her. She drank with high-flying entrepreneurs and partied with millionaires. She spent weekends in Brussels, Paris and New York, and weeks on yachts in exclusive hotels and on private islands. 3 years ago, on white sun-kissed sand beneath swaying palm trees, she'd met Tom, risk-taking, sun-seeking, pleasure-loving Tom. Together they were unstoppable, unbeatable, admired. She had believed it would last forever, but months after the fairy tale wedding, the first chinks in their perfect glass bubble appeared. He was neither kind nor caring, and her mention of children was met with cruel derision. She declined invitations to party after that, bored by the same fixed smiles and inane laughter. A life that had seemed full and fruitful showed itself empty, dull and self-centred, and Tom sought distraction elsewhere. The divorce was quick, though not without pain, thanks to a well-planned prenuptial contract. She walked away with all that was hers: a giant yucca plant, 10 boxes of books, and her own money safe and protected in her substantial portfolio. Her mother welcomed her, and Patsy had taken solace in the loving embrace of her mother's home and the sweet, gentle comfort of her beloved piano. Gently rocking in her chair, Patsy relived the reunion with her piano. How had she lived without it near her for so long? Being able to show her feelings through the music and songs she loved had sustained her in her teens when her parents divorced, an undemanding comfort in a world of shouting pain and heartache. Patsy opened the door of the burner, reaching for the poker, her tears drying quickly in the heat. 2 new logs sent fireflies up the chimney. She rested back. And then Jackie, her best friend from school, emigrated to Canada, which was a blow, but Nana's sudden passing was misery. The 2 women had leaned on each other, sinking together into the dark abyss, trying to hold their heads up in search of the light. But March last year was the turning point, a time of realisation for Patsy. "It's ticking away, Mum," she said. "Don't you fret, love. There's plenty of time." "For what? Is this it?" She turned to her piano for comfort and answers. At the keyboard she'd allowed her tears to dampen the keys, pouring out her anguish and uncertainty. The shallowness of her life played out in all its misery. Work was, well, work. It was what she knew and excelled at, what she got up every day, every morning for, what she strived all day for, and turned into numbers in her bank account at the end of the month. Family was Mum, and Hermione when she deigned to lower herself to speak to them, and Dad in his flat in Grays. Mum said he'd been a catch by all accounts, an adamant look-alike, mad eyes, impressive cheekbones and a flamboyant sense of dress. All Patsy saw now was a puffed-up dough ball of self-righteousness and bigotry. She paid for a week's holiday for him every year, as she did her mum, and after every infrequent visit told herself that she'd choose a man who respected and cared for her, not someone like her father. What had made her think for 1 second that Tom was any different from the selfish, self-absorbed man her mother had divorced? And that night, after a bottle and a half of Prosecco, her mum had divulged the extent of her unhappy marriage. "I should have divorced him when you were 6, not 16. 10 more years of bloody misery, but I couldn't see it or I didn't want to." Better the devil you know? Probably, but you're not aware of it at the time. It's the stories. What stories? The ones we tell ourselves about how life should be. And we live the stories, always looking for the happy ending. With her mum in the bath, Patsy had stroked the cool cream keys, placed her feet above the well-worn pedals and shut her eyes. Debussy's Girl with the Flaxen Hair was first, whisking her away from the hurt of unhappy relationships and into a field of poppies. She ran and danced barefoot among the twirling flowers in their scarlet tutus. She was 15 again, carefree and excited, the world of adulthood opening up in front of her. One of her Nana's favourites was next, from My Fair Lady. "I'm getting married in the morning." Patsy remembered the swish of silk against her legs and the scent of honeysuckle and rose from the swathes of flowers filling the church as she said her vows. Sobs racked her throat, her fingers following her heart. Rose Royce's Love Don't Live Here Anymore, singing from the keys. She stopped halfway through, caught between a desire to scream and an overwhelming urge to hide under the duvet for the rest of her life. She looked up and met Nana's eyes in the silver frame on the piano. She replaced her hands on the keys and shut her eyes. What a wonderful world filled the room and Patsy's heart. There was hope. There was a place for her somewhere. Their West Side Story song lifted her, and she allowed her body to sway with the tune until near the end of the song it transformed into a South Pacific classic. With renewed energy, she washed that man right out of her hair, and through the eyes of Princess Jasmine in Aladdin, she viewed a whole new world. Patsy knew what she must do. It took less than 24 hours to book accommodation, pack a bag, and be on the road to Wales. And during that time, Patsy couldn't remember another when she'd smiled so much. The music had sent her to Wales, and she'd never followed its lead before. And now was the time to immerse herself in the real world, leave behind the plastic, seething metropolis. The cottage was a museum to a tiny slice of history. Not only was it thatched, but the chimney itself was wicker. Dark wood encompassed the tiny lounge, both doors and walls, and once heavy latches were lifted, an even tinier kitchen, bathroom and bedroom were revealed, in stone topped with clom, a mixture of sand, lime and straw, finished in a lime wash. That night in the garden, beneath more stars than Patsy had ever seen, she cried out to the universe and howled to the moon. She was roused from a restful sleep the next morning by knocking at the front door. Rianne, dear Rianne, and her invitation to the musical evening, gift of cake and a friendly ear. For 2 hours they talked and laughed, and Patsy cried, unashamed in such safe, loving company. And Patsy promised to be there on Friday evening. Patsy dragged her knitting from its bag onto her lap and set the rocker in motion again. She hadn't meant to sit so long, but it had been a memorable year, a year begun at the musical evening. Griff Jones was there, a smiling, freckled 9-year-old, bouncing to get out of his wheelchair and join in the fun. The fundraiser to buy him a prosthetic leg so he could run like Johnny Peacock was off to a good start. £238 already raised from a sponsored run by his classmates and his dad shaving his head and beard. The stage was decorated with bunting and balloons. Wires trailed to the music system from microphones and amps. Patsy read her programme, grateful for the English translation, while the hall filled up around her. In a hubbub of stamping feet and laughter, the children of the school choir took up their positions. Griff centre stage in his chair, and then the lights went out. Patsy laid her knitting on her lap. She recalled the following 2 hours of that night with pure, unadulterated happiness. The candles sparking up, the scurry of feet and crackle of urgent voices, and then the rustle of the sheet music placed in front of her, seated at the piano beside the stage. Some songs she played from memory, closing her eyes, welcoming in her nana, and allowing the magic to flow through her fingers. And the finale. The lights came on, speakers popped and banged, and the fire brigade were called when the PA started smoking. Patsy spun in a whirlwind of smiles and congratulations, offers of tea, and admiration of her piano skill. She watched the flames dancing around a log in the burner and picked up her knitting. Just a few more rows. That night was the beginning of her new story, born out of music, magic and kindness. And tonight she would play for the friends she made that night from their request list. This was her way of saying thank you to those who helped her find her house and her life just one lane away from the tiny thatched cottage where it all started. Griff would be there, of course, probably sporting his new leg. Kelly, his mum, said he'd wear it to bed if she let him. Rhianne, Jess, Martha and Mia, who helped her move and get settled in and advertised her piano lessons, a circle of women on whom she could rely and trust. Nigel Griffith from Age Cymru, who'd contacted care homes offering her music for their residents, and his wife Claire, who worked with disabled children in the community, and Darvith, a local fireman with the voice of an angel, who come to rescue her the first day she lit the burner without first checking whether the chimney had been swept. Patsy loved her independent new life, but it was good to know she had a fireman she could call on in an emergency, or to keep her warm on chilly autumnal evenings. I hope you enjoyed the story tonight, and you'll come again to hear more. Bright blessings.